witnessed on stream so far. But again, I think it does speak to kind of what you were talking about, is that some of these players do have a little bit more of a tendency to just trust what they know, trust their ladder results, trust their prep, and they just maybe are a little bit resistant to some of the groupthink that comes into play with being a part of one of the larger practice groups who do tend to homogenize their deck lists and their lineups just that little bit more.
But for this matchup in particular, even back before all the nerfs to the Shaman Quest, to Flesh Giant, back in its very first iteration at the start of this meta, it did seem to be a heavy favorite for the handlock, just because Quest Shaman took such a long time to truly get to the point where they can counter pressure with any significant threats that don't just get eaten by Soul Rend, by the 3/3 Quillbore from the Warlock. And Warlocks, Flesh Giants, are so difficult for the Shaman to answer. Like, they tend to have to discover things like Torrent and Devolving Missiles to have an efficient answer to that, and outside of those they can die very, very quickly, let alone now that the quest takes even one more proc to get to Brukan.
Yeah, very true indeed. One Maker coming down, again, you mentioned Devolving Missiles, but it can be such a huge bonus for Shaman in the matchup. Not necessarily in the way that it is in some matchups where you kind of take your opponent's 3/4s and 4/4s and just delete them into Desk Imps and are able to deal with them very carefully. But it still, you know, shrinks down the size of minion that they have on board. But most importantly, it ruins the Raise Dead pool, because you just put assorted garbage into that card as opposed to just the guaranteed Flesh Giants and Gnolls and whatever else that they are looking for. Cookie found on curve there for ZloyGruzin. However, do not panic, dear viewers. This is not TJ casting Mercenaries. We will not spend the next 20 minutes now exclusively talking about Cookie. We will have some things to say about the gameplay.
But I still want to talk about it a little bit more.
Okay.
I do think this is a card that kind of slots well into Shaman, Quest Shaman, the anti-aggro deck, right? Which is generally the role that we have identified that Quest Shaman fills the best, right? It's a lifesteal card. The Death Rattle gives you a weapon that continues to help to deal with small minions. But I don't necessarily know if it's actually helping your main game plan towards beating Handlock, because I feel that every turn you're spending mana that is not progressing your quest is sort of just delaying the inevitable. It's giving Fruit maybe even more time to get down the Flesh Giants, and the weapon is not really doing very much to deal with 8/8s. But Gruzin has hit, I guess, a nice sort of balance of the early game, especially with that copied guidance, that he does have options to keep the quest rolling through. Did discover from the guidance double Doomhammer synergy cards, which could be pretty relevant post Brukan, but for now it's all about using these overload cards as fast as possible, in my opinion.
Yes, I certainly agree. And since we are going to talk about Cookie, I'm going to talk about Cookie even more, because I'm very curious about the flavor of Cookie, both in terms of what he's cooking, most importantly, but also, so he has lifesteal, right? That makes sense. He's making food. I can understand, like, food gives sustenance. Lifesteal makes sense. But when the Death Rattle happens, you get a rod, right? In my mind, that's him, like, bonking people who are trying to get to the food too early while he's cooking, right? Keeping it away. Why does that have lifesteal? I don't understand where the flavor comes into that as to why a rod has lifesteal. Very confused.
I don't know. Maybe it's just as good as Uther's weapons. I don't know. But a topic for another day, I suppose. Fruit going to happily progress his own quest as well. Flesh Giant number 1 has entered the hand, and Occult Neophyte as well, disrupting Gruzin's turn big time. He deliberately, I think, didn't overload for very much last turn, so he could play a clean 2+3 type of turn now. The breakpoints are a lot more awkward, but he does at least have the Lightning Bloom if he likes. But then he would only really be able to slot in a Lightning Bolt alongside a 4-cost card, not really achieving all that much in the end. So it looks like he is just going to go for the Slogger. And the Life Seal is keeping him nice and topped up here, which can be relevant if you have to, say, concede a turn where you are saying Battle Master can happen here, but at least I'm not dead to it immediately.
Yeah, and it's interesting looking at this hand now for Fruit. He kept a Soul Rend in his opening hand against Shaman, which is now starting to contextualize a little bit more. It's not necessarily something that I think we saw early on in proceedings, where I think the matchup was more focused on the Warlock just turboing out big threats. But because the quest has been slowed down, you do operate a little bit slower overall. So do you like the Soul Rend keep in this matchup? Do you think it's something that will bear fruit for his strategy?
I do like it. Maybe not for this particular pan out, but I find that the games where Handlock can get run over by Quest Shaman are the ones where they hit like the Note Taker, Bloom, Canal Slogger type of start, or the double Feral Spirits, and just having that Soul Rend in your back pocket is a very big deal. And it could still come into play a little bit later on, but we see Fruit here prioritizing getting the Flesh Giant down, going so far as to use Mortal Coil for no draw, just to make sure he could heal from the touch of the Nathrism, which then discounts his Flesh Giant. He's starting the counter pressure, and it could be very relevant as soon as he hits a Raise Dead. I don't think he expects this first one to stick, given that there's a mini mage already developed on board. And for Gruzin here, it's as simple as using double Serpent Shrine or Serpent Shrine plus Bolt to get rid of the Giant. But for Fruit, if that's the entire turn for Gruzin, then he can go for Backfire into Blood Shard Bristleback, or even Backfire plus Soul Rend.
Yeah, and I think that is another reason why... Oh, okay, that's a huge deal now, being able to pick up the proc off the Storm Strike here. Absolutely massive pickup off the first Silverwind Portal for sure. Huge minion now represented on the other side, not only representing huge damage, but also out of range of those Bristleback and Soul Rend removals that we've been talking about. So that is a big, big roll off the Silvermoon Portal for sure.
Huge, but for Fruit's sake, at least he does have Bristleback plus second touch here to get rid of that threat. Gruzin has been very deliberate about keeping his mini-mage stealth this entire time, saying that I don't want this to be Mortal Coil bait or Slinger bait, I'm just going to try and leverage that spell power, and it was already coming in clutch versus that Flesh Giant. I do like that decision, but for Fruit here, he can go for the Raise Dead right now to have better odds of getting back a Flesh Giant. But I wouldn't hate him also just trying to get back another Bristleback from it too.
Yeah, I really like this, getting another Bristleback thrown into the pool, because, yeah, the point I was just making before the Ghidra appeared is that another reason why I think Soul Rend has become a more important card in more matchups for the Warlock is that even in matchups like this, getting down to that 10-card breakpoint is such a big deal, because the fact that the other threats are a little bit slower now, the Flesh Giants are a little bit slower, it means that sometimes your fastest route to get big threats and big swings online is to get down to that 10-card breakpoint, which is of course something that Soul Rend does help you do, and now Fruit is there. Of course, getting more copies of those Scavengers and Bristlebacks is going to help him keep up on tempo very, very nicely with this. But now, wide board state coming down yet again for ZloyGruzin here. 8-drop, I believe, coming out from the charge call in this situation. So Fruit will be hoping that there's nothing too disgusting here that he can't deal with some sort of Soul Rend combination on the other side.
Gotta be Proto Drake, right? I was gonna say I'd be super tempted by the Devourer, but I thought Proto Drake allowed Gruzin to just stop there, but he's going in further for the 9-drop as well, and that's why he took the Arcane Devourer. And this is a lot to ask for in a deck that doesn't run Grimoire of Sacrifice. How is Fruit going to get through this Soul Rend plus the Blood Shard plus Slinger can deal with the Devourer, but it does leave the Sleepy Dragon up. Or you could just go double Bristlebacks on the 8-12 and leave the other stuff, but man, I'd be scared about the rest of the damage.
Yeah, looking like this might not even be a Soul Rend turn here. The fact that he's now cast double Raise Dead is of course improving his Shadowblade Slinger, but still not anywhere near relevant with these two 12 health minions that are left on the other side. Only 2 Bristlebacks able to be fit in this turn, and ZloyGruzin, I think, navigating this very, very nicely. This was a huge all-in push, but a huge all-in push that I can very much respect on the other side. He throws his head back as he gets hit with the 2 generated Bristlebacks. He's, of course, blissfully unaware that the other Bristleback was already sat in hand. But I really like his timing on the mini-mage attack there as well, right? Expecting, in both case scenarios, if that was going to be a Soul Rend clear for Fruit, great, get the 3 damage out of your mini-mage anyway, right? Because it will get cleared up in the AoE. But in the world where he has to hyper-focus on single target removal on the Anomaly and the Sleepy Dragon, that might mean that the 3-1 is just is able to hang around there, get that 3 free damage in. So I really like the way ZloyGruzin navigated through that turn.
I do agree with the micro decisions involved with if you are going to go for the all-in push, yes, you'd go for the Arcane Devourer in that situation, and yes, you push the 3-1, but I'm not completely sold on whether that was supposed to be all-in. I feel like getting down Uplig Proto Drake accomplished, you know, not a complete lethal setup, but a similar threat level over 2 turns perhaps, and maybe could have baited a Soul Rend still, while leaving the option to, if you just draw one more Overload card, have the other charged call for post-Brukan. Because I'm kind of worried about Gruzin's post-Brukan prospects right now without any more charge calls. He does have Feral Spirits, but he's going to have to top deck Fireheart, I think, in the near future to do anything super significant with both charge calls and both guidance already used up.
Yeah, no, that is very true. He is going to be a little bit light on resources from this point, but I guess it goes to speak to philosophy in the matchup overall of whether you can last long-term against Warlock in the kind of position you're in, because, you know, even one charge call post-Brukan, with some of the removal routes that are set up now for the Warlock with that Shadowblade Slinger thrown in there as well alongside the Bristlebacks. 1 or 2 huge minions aren't necessarily game-ending, you know, as we kind of saw, right, because it was a board. Essentially, you can treat that board he just made as a Brukan charge call board, right, where 2 huge minions came down. It wasn't necessarily game ending on the other side. So I do think it's quite a close decision, and maybe the fact that so many of his resources are gone also presents an argument to kind of push all in a little bit earlier, right? Because he can't necessarily rely on top decking guidance or that kind of stuff after Brukan to be able to go long term. But you are certainly correct in that this now does seem like a very underwhelming Stormcaller Brukan compared to what it could have been previously.
Perpetual Flame does allow him to get rid of the Baron Scavenger and push the Sleepy Dragon face, but Root honestly was happy to just float 6 mana because he does identify that he's in a position where he can just outvalue a Brukan endgame, which I feel really ridiculous saying, but given the fact that Gruzin has used so many resources, it is a very possible world. He's just held on to the Drain Souls and the Bloodshard Bristleback because he didn't want to waste any healing before he's seen the 7/7s or Feral Spirits, that type of thing, additional minions being generated. Has the Flash Giant now though, so he can set up a counter push, and he is making his way towards a timely Blightborn Tamsin as well. No Soul Rend even needed.
Yeah, to the Soul Rend kept on the far left of the hand the whole way through the entire game up to this point. Multicaster is at least an enticing pickup at this point, just to be able to grab some extra resources for Gruzin. But right now there's a bigger problem afoot, which is just the strength of the board on the other side that's been generated by Fruit. And despite Gruzin having most of the pressure through most of the game, those Bristlebacks have done so much work to be able to reverse not only the board state, but also the health totals. There's so much security now that Gruzin finds himself on the back foot.
Yeah, it's an awful situation that he has to give up on the multicaster here, because I truly think Gruzin's best avenue to victory is Fireheart from this situation, but he recognized that he was dead to Battlemaster if he had just not added any taunts to the board here. As it happens, the Soul Rend would blow up most of Fruit's own threats, so he doesn't have lethal with the Battlemaster here, but is there anything he can do with Drain Soul, Unstable? I don't see a lethal out.
I'm not getting any younger.
Yeah, like Tamsin, Drain Soul, yeah, it's just not quite there, right? One too many taunts on the other side. Even then, you wouldn't have the mana left over to be able to get the Wind Fury through.
Yeah, if he could bounce the, or if he could like get the 3/3 to have Wind Fury and then the 6/2. Wait. No, but then he would have to shoot his own 6/2 to get the Flesh Giant to have Wind Fury, and you just don't have the resources to shoot through all the taunts and still have something to shoot your 6/2. So I like that Fruit is not dwelling on it too much. If the lethal's not there, it's okay, you're still winning. Just get the Tamsin down, clear as many threats as you can, and win the game on the following turn, very likely.
Yeah, and I think also correctly understanding there's no real reason to be scared of this board in this position. You're not going to get bloodlusted or something silly from Days of Hearthstone past in this spot, so you can just trade things down, focus on your own game plan, clear up the board, bring it down to a couple of small minions on board, set up for the cleaner lethal outs on the following turn with that Battlemaster, Drain Soul, etc. to be able to push through the taunts.
Okay, multicaster for the full draw. Perpetual Flame into Overdraft is nice, especially with the the Novice Sapper, there is a chance to clear most of this, right?
There is.
You would have to have the Flames not start by hitting the 7-7 or 8-6. Oh, if he trades into the 8-6, then he gets the guaranteed full clear, right?
As long as he's then playing spell damage, yes, because
Yes.
worst case scenario, yeah, it would hit the 7-7 twice off the first 2 rolls, but even then the second proc on the 7-7 would activate the recast and kill everything else. So yeah, he'll be chilling here.
Wait, he's going overdraft first?
Why?
This is sketchy. I don't see any reason.
Yeah, it works fine the other way, right? Yeah.
I'm just gonna call that a mistake. I mean, if I really wanted to do some mental gymnastics, you could say he's loading up the next overdraft off the top, but yeah, for Fruit here, it seems pretty simple. Can get the Soul Rend into just tap to start the fatigue train rolling.
And play the forbidden 6-mana Anetheron to get this rolling. But yeah, the last 2 cards not relevant. Shadowblade Slinger and the last Soul Rend unlikely to be important. But there is the Instructor Fireheart now for the following turn with the locked up 10 mana available. This is going to be tap here into 5 more damage, followed by the absolute last push available here for Fruit in terms of actually making any kind of pressure on board. So if we were to see the mother of all Firehearts here, things are possible.
These are terrible though. Take the Wind Fury because it's the cheapest and move on, I guess. But okay, Lightning Storm. He needs to hit some like investment opportunity into generated lightning blooms to really get this to work. It's not happening though. Serpent Shrine into Wolf Rider, not in standard.
We will feed on this way.
That's money? Hello?
For no one but me.
Yeah, it's just not there.
Overdraft?
Take it for the next turn.
Yeah, I think so.
And there is gonna be a next turn, right? Because Fruit doesn't have lethal of his own, I don't think.
Yep, 4+5+2, I believe, is what's happening here. 4 and 5 from the fatigue, and then 2 from the life tap, so 11 damage in total. Honestly, if it wasn't for the big heal that Fruit can put together this turn, I think ZloyGruzin might have lethal set up here with the board that he's generated, and then Blast Bolt and Overdraft on the following turn as well. But I think Fruit is able to pick enough of this off the board to stay alive in this position.
He actually takes the Tidal Surge, which I'm not really sure if that gives him any break points to survive, because he'll go up to 11, right? But Fruit can then just deal 6+7, is it, on the next turn? So kind of the same thing.
Yeah. 15 damage total, 6+7 plus the 2 from the tap on the following turn, so even a double heal from the Tidal Surge. Okay.
But only 4 mana available, so he can only get that 1 Tidal Surge, which does heal for 8 because of the Brucon, sorry. It makes him go up to 15. And he is able to maybe discount the Tidal Surge, but there's no world where he can get the Note Taker to go along with the Tidal Surge, so it is still just GG.
Yep, as long as I've kept track of these numbers accurately, as long as this says 6, which it does, that is going to be 2+7 from here. And it was a valiant effort at the end. I do think it got a bit sloppy at the end for ZloyGruzin. I think, you know, whichever way, on the final like choices off the Fireheart, for example, I don't think there was any combination of cards that were actually relevant in terms of the outcome of the game. I was more focused in taking straight up natural damage so that you could burst down in one turn, but with the amount of overload that was coming out, I'm not sure if that was even relevant. But I suppose if you do take the overdraft in that spot, as I was suggesting, you can start the turn from that point. So you start with 6 damage, you then have 6 more from a lightning bolt and 4 more from a molten blast in that position, so you're doing 16 total, which is still not good enough through the Tamsin and the Drain Soul on the other side, right? I don't think.
But there's even more that we can trace back from this, right? Because there was also the turn where he ended with Perpetual Flame instead of Overdraft when the Perpetual Flame was a guaranteed clear already. So he could have gone into the next turn with less overload and also pushed more face damage with that overdraft that he would have had not needed to use on the 7-7. I'm not sure, again, if that would have led to any outs for Lethal, but certainly could have been tidied up a little bit more there. And for Fruit, I definitely like the overall game plan. The Soul Rend in the end was not used for the early pressure, but to just start the fatigue train rolling. It started to get super scary at the end because he did run out of all of the resources. If there were like a tidal wave in the mix somewhere, then maybe like Gruzin could have scrapped it out. But overall, Fruit's understanding that just having the factory of blood shard bristlebacks was a great way to victory, I think is a very creative way of approaching the matchup. Like the Flesh Giants didn't even factor very much into that, so much as just the constant removal and the recognizing of the fact that the charge calls were used prior to Brukan.
Yeah, not only the charge calls, but the guidances, everything else that really you want to use for those big, juicy pulls on the post-Brukan games, was able to adapt long-term. And it did honestly come right the way down to the wire, right? Because he was absolutely tapped out of value. And in those kind of fatigue scenarios, even though fatigue scenarios, Warlock tends to break all the rules because they're pushing so much fatigue damage back the other way. The mantra of last board wins still holds a lot of weight there, right? So if there was maybe one more turn or a slightly better series of rolls off that Fireheart, or even if the Fireheart was able to come down a turn earlier in that scenario, we could have seen a very different game for sure. But we will now move on to the Libram Paladin from Fruit, where we do have the Mr. Smite highlighted there as a key card. That is a very interesting proposition, of course. We've often talked about how, you know, charge damage in this deck would be a very interesting prospect because of all of those potential zero-mana Librams that you can choose to load up on there alongside Hand of Adal and whatever else that you can use to stack through huge amounts of damage. But as is custom these days, when a Grandmaster's caster is presented with the idea of Libram Paladin, we have to say that stats be damned anywhere else in the world. Anytime this is cast at a high level by one of us, it tends to fall spectacularly. Double somersault front tuck directly into a face plant on the ground every single time we see this perform at a high level.
Okay, I'm willing to give it the benefit of the doubt for two reasons, though. First one is, it's a bit of a fresh take on Paladin, right? He's got the SI7 Skulkers in there and the Mr. Smite. And also, his name is Fruit, and therefore he will draw the Banana Men, both of them. That's a powerful thing to do.
That is, you are absolutely right. Fruit is definitely understanding the meta. The relationships with Fruit in one way or the other do make you a very powerful Hearthstone player. That is a proven fact in the history of Hearthstone. And drawing Banana Man in the opening hand is clearly a talent that he possesses.
Gruzin not with the greatest opener either. He does have a lot of potential should he run into a Lightning Bloom because of the Note Taker just waiting around there. But for Fruit here, the curve is just looking amazing, right? I didn't even get to go in to depth more why I like the SI7 Skulkers, but just the fact that Paladin is so discreet with its 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 type of curve that if you just miss one spot in the middle, your power level tanks so much. Whereas the SI7 Skulker can cheat you one step on that perfect ladder of counting up. So I kind of like that. It's similar to Cariel in some instances as well. But for now, it's more about just having all those resources because of the Bannerman here.
So I'm presuming with the sequencing here from ZloyGruzin on the previous turn that he is looking to turbo out Lady Vash here as opposed to going with the Novice Zappers, because obviously he had the opportunity to discount one Zapper, play a Zapper, and then get a discount again, which he chose not to do in that scenario. So he will be wasting a little bit of mana here if he chooses to lead out with Novice Zapper. So I can only imagine he's looking for some Lady Vash action instead here. Yep. Lead out with that.
It is a powerful card if he does assume that he's going to make it to the late game, and I have seen quite a few Quest Shaman versus Libram Paladins turn into a bit of a scrappy battle in the post-Brukan world versus the post-Lady Liadrin world. It's a lot of resources on either side, and maybe the additional spells drawn from Vash Prime could help Gruzin in that scenario, but I am more worried about him surviving this early game because the curve just does not stop from Fruit here. He can get so much value from all of his cheap minions because of of the +2/+2 from both the Bannermen here. And after that, it's going to be the Devout Pupil, it's going to be Varian, and the Samuro joins the mix as well in case Gruzin tries to stop the bleeding with Feral Spirits or something.
Clearly, Gia has been listening to far too much of Raven's movie trailer casting as she begins to talk about the post-Brucan world. Yeah, it was something I was freaking out about earlier as you were talking about the Banana Man in the opening hand, but it was then just every cheap minion in sequence drawn from the rest of the deck at that point as well, and it was second Attendant. The other one drop, Skulker, came out as well, so he has got to convert this value into tempo so quickly because of just how cheap the minions he's dumped those stats onto were in his hand.
Wow, the Truth Seeker as well. It's perfect for Fruit here. And he can use the Libram of Justice aggressively if he likes, or hold on to it to go alongside the Samuro. I do like the second option because Charged Call is a card. You want to make sure you can deal with an emergency switch for a Deathwing or something like that. Gruzin continuing to progress his own quest and making sure he doesn't get run over. Both are players at perfect 30 because of all the healing effects that have joined the mix. But Gruzin still 3 overload spells away from getting to the Brucan.
Finally, the one remaining piece of the puzzle, missing piece of the puzzle. I say finally as if he's been drawing badly this game. He's been drawing incredibly well this game. But having now picked up the Libram of Wisdom as well, his hand is really going to begin to pop off because now not only can he start pumping down those Devout Pupils so they get as cheap as possible, but also any kind of board that stacks up on the other side, he's going to have a good chance of being able to deal with now with the Blademaster Samuro without perhaps even being able being forced to commit one of those equality effects.
True. Pretty good guidance for Gruzin though, just anything that gets him even more overload, even if it has to go through an investment opportunity, is above average, I think. What is it with him and Nosmanis?
You've had your moment in the sun, okay? Jambray was on stream, you had your chance and you blew it. Now get back in your box until the next expansion.
Okay, Aldor Truthseeker number 2 can happen here, or if Fruit wants, just jam an 8/8 on the board. That seems very powerful. I wouldn't mind him missing the healing because it seems like he's just very much approached this game from an aggressive standpoint, not trying to outlast the Quest Shaman so much as abuse the windows in which they haven't even gotten Brucan on board just yet. Gonna go for both even, but it looks like he is going to pay respect to this Bloodweaver and still manages to get the Devout Pupil as well because of the bouncing effect of the Librams of Wisdom, and it's still enough pressure similar to an 8/8, I think.
Yeah, I was wondering why not both, and to be honest, I'm still kind of wondering why not both, but now that I look at the end of the turn, I certainly see the arguments for the line that Fruit's gone with here, because it's a very similar board state, right? 6/7 Divine Shield instead of an 8/8 or 9/9 Divine Shield, arguably, if you're going to still put a Libram on it in this spot. But Nazmani Bloodweaver is a threatening card that, you know, when it pops up in a different deck than the one you're expecting to see it in, a little bit hard to calculate exactly how much damage it can do to you in terms of mana ramp, but probably best just to shut that option down and not have to worry about it too much, especially when you probably feel like your position is very comfortable otherwise, as Fruit does currently.
Gruzin hits the double Scrapyard Colossi, which is definitely the one you're looking for here. Anything that has resiliency to equality effects. Fruit will be able to get through the first half with the Libram of Justice and City Tax, but the double 7/7s that come at the back of it start to get a little bit problematic. Gruzin deciding whether he wants to commit the Lightning Bolt on the 5/5, and I'd say it seems good, right? Why not?
Yeah, I feel like I would have gone for it there as well, personally, because right now you've kind of left it in a spot where the first half of your board is actually fairly evenly contested by what you see on the other side. Or, you know, in reverse, if you want to look at it this way. Like, the second half of your board is quite evenly contested by what you see on board. So it only requires that one equality to come down, and then the board, especially with a Divine Shield in play, is able to make quite the mess of this board state on the other side.
It'd be that Gruzin's maybe hoping to catch the 5-5 off Dunk Tank, which will provide essentially 4 AoE plus the 8 damage on one target of his choice. But that would still be a little bit short of dealing with the 5-5 at that point. Fruit, I like the optimization of swinging first into the first half of the scrapyard because he's spotted that the city tax then gave him a breakpoint to trade down one of the second halves with his devout pupil, but the remaining 7-7 was a bit problematic for him there.
Well, he could have gone, so instead of healing the Truth Seeker, he could have traded the Truth Seeker and the weapon swing into the, or did he already use the weapon swing on the first half? Like, no, he used the city tax. Okay, so he used the weapon first, then used the city tax to clear the other half, plus deal the 1 damage, right? Yeah,
yes.
Okay, that makes sense. Because otherwise he could have used the 5 attack and the weapon swing to go into the 6 health, got the Libram back into the hand, and then buffed the Divine Shield up to 7 attack going through the other way. But there's no way to do that and also deal with the first half in the way that he did it. So yes, I do agree with the optimization.
It's a really difficult board state, and Fruit actually spotted the line almost immediately. Still gets his board cleared by the power of Brukan Dunk Tank, but he has still plenty more resources where that came from. A bit annoying that the Samuro, even with Libram of Wisdom, is not able to survive the 7-2 here, but he's just going to face tank it, has plenty of health to work with, and he can develop Pupil plus Libram of Hope here, and I think it's fine. Gruzin is starting to gas out.
He is, but he is staring at a note taker now, so I'm sure he will be staring at the remainder of his deck and just praying that he can hit a high value out here, because such is the nature of Quest Shaman. They can go from empty hand to full hand incredibly rapidly with the right sequence of draws, so he will be hoping for some major juice coming off this draw. That's about the worst thing he could have got in this scenario.
It's a smite. Is this lethal? Not quite, but it's a lot of damage.
It certainly is a lot of damage. 12, 17, 23, 24 going through with the Libram of Wisdom as well. Enough certainly to set up a very convincing lethal with just a weapon swing and a 1-1 next turn on top of all of this as well.
Give me a new card like the Murloc before, except it turns your recruits into pirates this time.
Oh! Oh! That's the card!
Okay,
that is the card, Gia!
And elementals. There's a rabbit. However, there's a lot of divine shields. Is the rabbit even that good?
There's a lot of divine shields, and there's also some very good positioning right now from Fruit on the other side with the 1-1 interrupting the 2 big minions.
Write that down.
Yeah, maybe it was even better if you just put the taunts way on either end, but the fact that they're not next to each other is the big point here. Every rabbit!
Yeah, classically the idea is just to spread the 2 taunts out on the far sides in the scenario to play around exactly this kind of spot, but as you can see, just the Divine Shields themselves being absolute terrors in this spot, and that means 9-9 plus weapon on the other side is not going to be good enough, but he does hit the taunt totem, but the Mr. Smite in hand is going to be enough to take this one down. Weird ending to the game. It all happened very quickly at the end, but I believe ZloyGruzin had another rabbit and a null as other possibilities along the way, which certainly would have kept him alive, which by definition is better than not that, right? Which is what happened at the end. If he didn't roll the Taunt Totem, he was dead on board from what he can see, and certainly dead on board to any source of damage from hand. So a little bit sketchy about some of the choices from ZloyGruzin, and right at the end there as to the discover options from the charge call, but still, that was the draw he was going to need as a bare minimum to find some way out of what was a very, very bad looking game for him overall.
Agreed. I think the third rabbit could have won him the game if he had picked one. He would still have to, hope that Fruit doesn't top deck Lady Liadrin in the next turn because, taking the third rabbit means you don't set up counter lethal for the next turn. But it gave him outs to survive against what he saw on board, which is a 9-9 and the weapon. So I am also questioning that very last choice, but it all leads up now to Fruit being on match point, gotten the win with the Libram Paladin and the hand lock, and I believe the Demon Hunter was banned away, so it's the Face Hunter left now, which is decidedly a worse matchup into Quest Shaman, you'd have to imagine.
And Gia, one more time, say it loud and say it proud for the people in the back. The win with the Libram Paladin, the first port of call from Fruit. And he got there. One game, one win, Libram Paladin back on the horse. I'm sure this will be the beginning of the reign of terror in competitive Hearthstone for Libram Paladin now.
I'm telling you, it's the Skulkers. They didn't do very much in that game, but they're just the lucky charm. Gruzin gonna switch off his Shaman though and go on to his other quest deck in the Warrior, which has a much more control-y slant to it, which I think makes sense in the greater context of his lineup. If you're running Quest Shaman, I do think you're trying to target the Hunters of the world, the Aggro Druids as well. And so having things like double Rancor in your Pirate Warrior makes a lot of sense to me. The double Man the Cannons we're seeing in a lot of different lists. But on top of that, Gruzin's also running Minefields, which is a card that I feel has fallen out of fashion quite a bit because of Man the Cannons. So there is a lot of redundancy here in terms of the removal, which probably hurts the matchup against slower decks, but certainly will be welcome to prey on the Face Hunter from Fruit.
Yeah, and just very quickly before we get into this one with the Face Hunter, Lorinda has handily provided a couple of updates from around the tavern to our alert. I won't spoil them specifically because I don't know what we're going to be recapping or what the other casters will be recapping once Gia and myself are done with this featured game. But there are a couple of very crucial results in terms of Grandmaster's promotion that have taken place in this round. So if you're interested in that, do go over to your local neighborhood Twitter feed and take a look at some of your favorite players, and you might just get some good news. If you would like to remain unspoiled, then of course, stay with us and we will take you through the broadcast in real time.
Fruit here with the Face Hunter is running a list that doesn't run Ramming Mount, which I've seen a lot of players kind of gravitate towards in the newer meta, just doubling down on buff effects and cosplaying Paladin essentially as Hunter with the Doggy Biscuit and that card to give you more resiliency. I don't mind him not running it though, because sometimes you want to have a bit more options with early game minions you want to play as opposed to buffing effects. He doesn't have the Arcane anomaly though, which I've also seen from other hunters, sticking more to a tried and true list with the Doggy Biscuits and the Moonfang to top it out. And I think that Moonfang is probably going to be very important to have any measure of threat sticking against a warrior that has this much removal to the list.
Yeah, I would certainly agree with that assessment, but we have seen Face Hunter perhaps not the terror that it has been at its high point over the last couple of expansions, but certainly still doing a good deal of work if it can get that smooth opening curve. This is a little bit slow, tiny bit clunky overall here from Fruit, but that Neophyte on turn 2 is pretty monstrous, it has to be said, shutting down any coin plays, and the coin plays were probably what ZloyGruzin was looking at there with the Storm and Freebooter being able to make a mess of this board state if it was not for that Neophyte.
And that is a gorgeous cosmetic coin that it has shut down here. This board state looks very weak to Minefield, but Gruzin doesn't quite have that option. Just going to go for the Man the Cannons, which will leave the Neophyte up. So a small win for Fruit there to continue pushing any measure of damage, because he has a very small window to get this pressure going through before Gruzin starts taking the board back with Rancors, with rushing Pirates, and then stacking up that armor. Still found room for the heavy plates in this list.
Rushing Pirates or Russian Pirates, Gia?
Rushing.
Like,
sorry.
Okay.
Gruzin is from Russia, though, according to our sheet.
Exactly. I thought it might have been deliberate.
Well, there's a Moonfang, and that's the Bulwark, the natural predator, I suppose, of the Moonfang.
Ah, yes, top of the food chain, the spiky plank, as Darren called it earlier. Yeah.
Ed and Eddie knew what they were talking about. You got to keep those company to deal with big wolves, apparently. Not the greatest selection of secrets here. Maybe Snake Trap, just to have any form of board presence. The Open the Cages seems unlikely to go off, because even though the Moonfang is likely to stick, any second minion I think is going to be swept away very easily.
Yes, I would agree with that, but honestly, These do seem like a selection of the bad ones, to be perfectly honest. I think freezing might still have been the most attractive in that position, even with nothing on board, just because it would give you that potential to just straight up ignore opposing minions. Snake Trap, unlikely that you're going to have your minions attacked into anytime soon, especially because this Bulwark is in play, which is not really going to be used to swing forth anytime soon. So it just ends up taking Explosive Trap, just saying, well, this is the only one that really does damage, which is all I'm particularly interested in doing at this exact moment in time.
True. Shaves, I guess, maybe one charge off the Bulwark if Gruzin decides to attack face at some point. But the nuts would have been pack tactics, right? With a Moonfang on board.
Yep.
And I thought Gruzin would never attack the Moonfang because of that possibility here, right? That would just add such a big headache on top of what's already kind of a ticking time bomb, right? Only 2 charges left on the Bulwark, and Fruit has weapon hero power to shave those off next turn. And both the Sword Eaters would overwrite the Bulwark, which makes Gruzin's hand pretty much unplayable.
Sorry, how does ZloyGruzin live with this headphone cable as part of his life? I don't understand. It's just like you jerk your head back, you're going to pull your entire computer monitor over. He's trying to put his hand to his face. He's just smashing the cable directly into his nose. Like, this seems like a nightmare from my perspective.
I wish you hadn't drawn my attention to that because it's going to start bothering me too. But
okay.
I will say I do like his Uniqlo X Blizzard Hearthstone shirt. I have one of my own. Okay, Taunt in the way, Gruzin kind of accepting that his Bulwark was going to die to hero power weapon anyway if he didn't put a Taunt on board, so he overwrote it, while also taking 1 charge off the Moonfang's health as well. Fruit here, not seeing the greatest way to push the Moonfang face, but I guess you're happy to use a quick shot or an aim shot on this just to get the 8 damage through.
Yeah, seems fine. Still a good chunk of damage going through, especially because the Bulwark has bit the dust there, which I think is a decision we probably did not talk about enough, because those 2 charges were a lot of potential damage being tanked in that spot. Obviously, you're playing against Hunter. It's very likely that 2 charges get chewed through with, say, a hero power and then a small source of damage from hand. But I think you did, by playing a Taunt and not having the Bulwark in play, increase the possibility of taking a big smack from the Moonfang on that turn with the way that you ended up playing it.
I mean, it was really hard because if he didn't play the Taunt, he lost the Bulwark to weapon swing plus hero power, but the Taunt overwrote the weapon. So either way, I think it was an awful position for Gruzin. And he still does not have a guaranteed way of getting through the Moonfang. Like, he could try and snipe it with the Defias Cannoneer, and I honestly think his position is bad enough that he has to go for something like that and then top off with the Sword Eater to protect against the new weapon from Fruit.
But this explosive trap from 3 turns ago is now looking inspired, because the only place that ZloyGruzin can swing is into the face, which does now activate that explosive trap. And based on that reaction, oh no! 8-2, Doggy still alive and well over the other side. Ranker does nothing. Oh no, disaster. 5 health, Doggy still alive, quick shot, hero power, and Fruit has just rolled the triple cherries on this one and absolutely crushed it.
What? Are you kidding? Is this Moonfang also just immune to everything on top? I don't understand. It doesn't.
They just
matter in
couldn't
the
be
grand
bothered
scheme of
to
things.
work out how to code that interaction, so they just made it immune. I think that's what happened in that position. So the shots just always go face. 4 out of 4. Fruit takes this one down 3-0. He goes up to 6-0. ZloyGruzin still in a fantastic position overall, 5-1 record. It's, you know, you don't want to be losing any rounds in a big Swiss tournament like this, but if you're going to pick up one loss, pick it up late, pick it up in round 6, round 7, round 8. That gives you the best chances to still be getting through on those tiebreakers if things do come down to it. But yes, I think run of the draw certainly in favor of Fruit in that series overall from what we've said. But I would also say quality of play in favor of what we saw from Fruit overall in that series as well. He did just seem to be the slightly tidier of the 2 players, but part of that can be credited to the fact that he was in more comfortable situations throughout as well.
Absolutely, and I think this continues our story of dominance in the Masters Tours from players from China. And I think it's doubly impressive if we run up into a Chinese player that doesn't have one of these big team names attached to their player tag, which we often see like World Elite, Royal Never Give Up, LF. All of these Chinese players that we're used to seeing make the big leagues tend to already have these established practice groups, maybe with the exception in recent memory of Zhou Chanyu. Fruit could be continuing that story. I mean, he's not got a team that I'm aware of, but he's playing some very solid Hearthstone, looking in a good position to make it to the top 16 and be yet another feather in the cap of the Chinese region when it comes to these Masters Tours. Very impressive stuff.
Yeah, it's very interesting as well because Zhou Chanyu, the last one that we saw doing that without a name attached, he gave an interview, I believe, to TJ afterwards through Translator, where he said something along the lines of aggro decks are for noobs, they're for bad players, and if you're a good player, you should play control decks or combo decks. Well, here we now have another relatively unknown Chinese player just bringing good old aggro and smashing face with some Paladin and Face Hunter, showing you that there is more than one way to slice an orange to if you're going to get there into potentially another big performance in a Masters Tour from a Chinese representative, because they really have been taking several tournaments by absolute storm, as they were very keen to remind us in all of the promotional footage for the HGI that we both took part in recently.
Absolutely, and that is just going to be the first part of our round 6 coverage. After this break, we're going to see which other of our players start to have their efforts bear fruit. Don't go anywhere.
Hello everyone and welcome back to Masters Tour Undercity. We are ready to cover some more matches for you guys. I'm Raven and joining me is Derek. We're going to be taking a look at Wolder versus Ace. But just quickly before we get in there, Derek, how have you found the tournament so far? Because it's been, at least for me, a little bit unexpected into just how aggressive like most of these lineups actually are.
That's right. There have been a lot of questions coming into this tournament. I think the first and foremost on everyone's minds was Garrote Rogue, which has been the terror of the metagame ever since it was a deck that existed, basically. And with the nerf to Garrote only shuffling 2 bleeds instead of 3 now, some people, some of the best players in the world, Gabby, myself, were arguing that it wouldn't be a thing anymore, but then I think the believers have been vindicated now that Garrote Rogue does still appear to be a very, very powerful deck. But like you say, in that power vacuum that was expected to emerge, a lot of players have just gone with good old aggro. There's quite a few good aggro decks right now, and especially with the bolster to their board presence, primarily in Hunter getting Ramming Mount and Doggy Biscuit, it's made for a very sticky metagame in these early turns where you need an incredibly strong amount of removal to actually be able to keep up with these aggro decks.
Yeah, well, we are going to be checking out this matchup, and we are going to dive into game number 3. Looks like Ace has already taken a victory with that Shaman, and Wolder, another win goes to Paladin, Derek. And I know just then Sottle was talking about how we've gotten used to seeing Paladin fall over every time we see it on stream. Paladin in general, again, I don't have the numbers for the exact archetypes, but Paladin in general appears to be performing at least relatively well, like above 50%, I think, ending the day yesterday, which doesn't sound that impressive, but with the hundreds upon hundreds of games that are played out throughout rounds of a Masters Tour, above 50% means you're doing something right, because there are many decks below that at this point. But it looks like we are going to check out Wolder's next deck, which is going to be that Fell Demon Hunter, which we've not seen tons of recently, but it's always a fear when there is that aggressive meta, right? When there is just a lot of aggro decks. Well, guess what? Fell Demon Hunter can often clean those up nicely.
That's right. If we try and take paint a picture of this metagame or sculpt how the tournament has been looking, there's been an odd hole here that we haven't quite been able to piece together what should be filling it. And the Demon Hunter, the Fell Demon Hunter specifically, has been a key piece of this tournament that we haven't seen all too much. It ended the day yesterday at the individual highest win rate archetype, above Garrote Rogue even, which says a lot. And that is in no small part because of exactly as you said, huge amounts of aggro being brought to this tournament. And if you thought Quest Shaman was good against aggro, oh boy, Fell Demon Hunter is an entirely different story. It feels almost purpose-built to just absolutely dumpster all these aggro decks. It's got removal, it's got healing, it's got sustain, it can go early game, it can go late game, it's got actual win conditions, so they don't have time to just refill as aggro druid and draw back up to all these strong combos. If you know what you're doing in the hands of a good player, this is... It has as close to 100% versus aggro as you're realistically going to get in this metagame. Like Face Hunter in particular, more so before the buffs, the buff cards into the deck. But in the previous builds, it was like an 80-90%. It felt like it was just so overwhelmingly favored. But up against the Quest Warrior for Ace, things get interesting, because Pirate Warrior on its own, Quest Warrior if you prefer, is not necessarily a pure aggro deck, and this version as well for Ace is teched in a somewhat interesting way.
Yeah, even more defensive than the general defensive options we do see, right? There's, of course, the group of pirates there to get that quest going, but there's the Bulwark of Azeroth, which is fine. We've seen that knocking around. The Rancor as well in there, but I think most importantly, that one Brawl that provokes in there as well, but also that cheeky Mutinous at the top end, which again, against specifically Fell Demon Hunter, I mean, a lot of the reliance is on Jace to sort of clean up and sort of take the board late game, and also Il'gynoth as well to give some kind of just a way to actually sort of feel comfortable ending the game as well. So we'll be interested to see if this Mutinous comes into play in this one. But one thing is we just see the mulligans now. Interestingly enough, both players not banning Demon Hunter and both players bringing Fell Demon Hunter to their lineup is kind of funny, right? We see two players at 4-1 here, both doing extremely well with obviously that high win rate deck you were talking about.
Yeah, exactly. And I think it makes sense. Both players have gone for an anti-aggro lineup as opposed to an aggro or a combo lineup, with them both bringing Quest Shaman, both bringing Fell Demon Hunter, both bringing this more anti-aggro teched version of Quest Warrior as well, and then Paladin to round it out. They've basically got the exact same lineup for both players. And so I do think they're going to give themselves a very, very good chance against the likes of Aggro Druid, Face Hunter, or Aggro Elemental Shaman, which has also been cropping up here and there as well. But to kick things off here, Ace here with the pretty reasonable looking curve of Pirates. He's got himself the 2-3 and then Fogsail Freebooter, if nothing else, on 4 to get the quest rolling, which means he's got a nice proactive game plan, whereas the Fell Demon Hunter on the other side, if you had to levy one real criticism at the deck, is that it has very little in the way of proactivity in the early turns.
Yeah, that's right. A lot of it is reliant on your opponent playing minions to be able to do anything reasonable. There is the Fell Barrage being played just to clean that one up, and again, just to, weirdly enough, just to use it. If you kind of get what I mean, right? And you're saying there's no proactive play. It's like you do just want to use your mana to get the spells into the Jace, which has just hit the hand there for Wolder. So pretty decent start overall, especially with that skull on the far left for Wolder, means he can just, again, try and negate one of the downsides I've had in the past with this deck is sometimes you just whiff a little bit on card draw, and then you're like, okay, I've got an Immolation and a Fell Screen Blast, and nothing else for like 3 turns. It gets a little bit tricky, but both players seem to be having a reasonable amount of resources, but I do think Ace is looking good here because he's drawn the aggro part of his deck, which means surely, or in the near future, cards such as that Mutinous and such as that Bulwark, if he's feeling scared, will start just hitting his hand, and that means that if this aggro plan doesn't work out, which I can't expect he's realistically thinking, oh, I'll just kill him on turn 5 against Fell. Right? It's probably not going to happen, let's be honest. It does mean that he will get to those slightly later power plays.
Yeah, these Pirates are born to die here. They are really just an excuse to get Captain Rikara in hand, because as you say, both players know what's up. They know these Pirates are just going to trade with the removal for Wolder, and they're both going to end up back at step 1 in all reasonable likelihoods. Obviously, this is going into turn 6 now for Ace, so while the expected play is double freebooter, right? Stormwind and Fogsail, Coin Mr. Smite is something you can consider here because of the fact that they almost certainly are going to go for Skull, given that it was kept in the starting hand. And therefore, this very brave and risky play for Ace, I think is actually well calculated, and I'm a big fan of it.
Let's see if there's anything. Wolder can get some cards that would actually help him deal with Smite this turn, and that is one of them. So not a bad outcome there. I mean, Ace did still get the 6 damage from Smite, and I've been playing a lot of Warrior lately, and I do think it's pretty rare that you do anything too crazy with the Smite combo, I'll call it, of playing Smite with Pirates on the same turn. A lot of the time it does feel like it's either like the first Rokara generation turn, or you just play Smite for just a lot of damage from hand. So you can see him pressuring Wolder down a lot now, and very quickly, Derek, I said this wouldn't end on turn 5 or 6, but maybe it'll end on turn 7.
It does look like it's getting there, doesn't it? Wolder's got a couple of tricks up his sleeve, I think, just to be able to survive in the immediacy. Obviously, there's a few draws that allow him to just go for Magtheridon, clear the board, and get a big stonking minion down on the board as well. But he does need to hit them, because like you say, this is kind of scary. But if that wasn't all enough, it really is just the Rikara that might spell that end for Wolder here. That 4 damage that's probably going to go face every turn really does rack up.
We'll just have a little peek.
Oh, nice play there.
Ooh.
This is the Rokara. And I think you saw both players react to that. Ace was like, not like this. Wolder clearly disappointed that he didn't hit the Rokara, which he knew obviously for a fact that was there.
I think Ace... Well, yeah, he was more hoping for that he might actually just survive or win on the next turn if Wolder couldn't heal up enough. But quite clearly that's not the case anymore. So instead, Outrider's Axe doesn't give lethal. Slam the Captain.
Yep, I like the Shiver as well, just to get rid of the Selena. No problem at all. Free up some space and make it as likely as possible, as you said, that those cannons every turn just smash face now, right? Like Wolder, Ace won't want there really to be minions sticking around. But again, another big ask from Wolder here to deal with this board and feel any kind of safety. He does have, what, I-Beam double Fel Barrage? Like, maybe he, like, trades into the 2-2 and then just plays Jace?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, he's going for McThird, I guess, right? He has the Immolation Aura and the Fel Screen Blast.
Yeah, I think this is a reasonable time to try and turn things around. Like, Wolder can hope for Skull off the top as ideally the next card. But even outside of that, Jace Darkweaver should be able to stabilize him against the likely pretty weak board that comes down next turn.
Just wait for Spike out.
Well, yes, that would put an end to things very rapidly. But even just the Magtheridon body, right? A 12-12 is likely to soak up quite a few cannon blasts. Quite clearly not the case here, though, as Ace just gets both of them straight to the dome.
Yeah, and with Barov and whatever Ace wants to deal with this, it's looking good. And although personally I'm not a huge fan of the more control-y Quest Warrior lists, I still run Barov in my very aggro list because the card's just too good. I think the fact that if your opponent tries to put up some last-ditch defenses, you can just blast them away, no problem, is something that's very, very strong indeed. But we do see the goal. Wolder brave enough.
It's really tempting on this turn, isn't it? We've already seen a good amount of healing, to be fair. We've seen a Fel Screen Blast, we've seen an I-Beam, we've seen some of the attack buffs as well. It's the turn before turn 10, so Fury will only give +3 and not +4 attack on this turn.
A lot of the cards you just said are also in the Jace pool. And I wondered if it was ever worth just going for Jace. As it is, though, the Fury and the Chaos Strike will help out a little bit, but the double Arcanist is not what he was after, right? Like, he wanted just any other potential like, AoE spell. He can, of course, clear the Barov, and the Barov will kill the 3-1, but just something else that was actually active that turn would have been very nice for him.
It was a really tough turn, because like you say, all the attack buff cards were in the Jace pool on the turn where he still had a charge of the weapon, right? Because from here on in, he's not going to get any healing off of those effects. So you had to choose, do I go for the Jace while I have the weapon equipped, or do I go for the Skull while it's in outcast position? Because if you don't play it on that turn, it's going to be like 3 turns later where you can actually play it in the outcast position, most likely. Wolder made his choice and went for the Skull instead, but like you say, he really did not hit the goods.
Go for Jace now. Wonder whether it was worth going for Studies. Just to see what he could get hold of. Not sure what else this mana could be saved for, but most importantly, he's healed for a bit. But a sheer just lack of minions on the board was actually weirdly a benefit for Ace at this point, right? Because Ace is nowhere near dead. He's got plenty of health, which means these Fel Barrages just smashing face are actually just fine. It's not really a big deal. And obviously Ace's board is kind of infinite at this point with that one pirate turn.
Yeah.
But this is where the drawback hits, right? Sorry. Where Ace has now like a Rancor and a Brawl in his hand.
Right.
And these are the parts of the deck, well, these are the reasons why I don't really like the control version. Because now these draws are a little bit weird. Same with like Bulwark of Azinov, for example. If that gets drawn, that's also a little bit off. But, okay.
Ooh. Shadow and Divulging. Again, like you say, one of these slower cards that is kind of sitting in a...
Wait.
I don't know, a middle ground. Oh, what?
Oh, I guess it's not a big deal. I wondered whether he was thinking about, like... For a second, I was like, wait, can he bounce his own 1-1 here and then play it for a new card?
He could consider it. Yeah, maybe that gets there.
Still, they'll put his opponent to 2 when his pirate ship deals damage every single turn. Looks like a good plan to me.
Oh, he's so close to lethal here. It's just the tiniest bit off. Like, he needed the Fel Screen Blast. I-Beam would have done... not quite enough, only 14. But Fel Screen Blast off the top would have been able to do it. This, however, is just not good enough.
Probably just the worst selection, right, of 3 cards he could have been offered here.
Pretty bad.
So now does he have to just play loads of minions, hope his opponent gets the Whetstone Axe, and hope the pirate doesn't have charge, basically, right?
Yeah.
This is Wolder just on the ultimate long shot. I do think he has to play just a lot of stuff this turn, even though it looks pretty bad. Wait, what does this Felgorger draw? Do you have anything even left from that? I don't think so.
I couldn't tell you.
I'm guessing if he's not playing it, he's not, right? I think that's probably fair to say.
Throws back Brawl.
Oh,
I thought we'd throw back Vulcan there, but okay, fair enough. I guess that just makes it less likely for cannons to go face or something like that if you have an extra way to fire them. But here it is. Ace just needs one weapon, one cannonball phase or a tiny bit of damage from the weapon. He gets both. That's going to be it. Pirate Warrior, even with this slower controlling variant, still just good enough, it turns out, to take down the Fell Demon Hunter, as we can argue about some of Wolder's choices there, but in the end, it was close. He, with a couple of draws, could have got there for lethal damage, but the consistency from the Juggernaut, the damage every single turn, is clearly too much for the Fell Demon Hunter to stabilize against.
Yeah, I think even though I don't think Ace really felt the sting of like drawing the bad cards in this matchup, he did obviously, as we can see, have a Rancor in his hand for quite a while. Other than that, he did get the Pirate Curve, right? He got the Captain Rukara nice and early, got it down on 7, which I think is like reasonably average timing for Pirate Warrior, even the aggro lists. So yeah, just pretty solid overall, and Wolder just couldn't quite get hold of the board. This was a big turn with the Magtheridon, but the Barov just sitting ready and waiting to deal with that really just, I think, was the final nail in the coffin there for Wolder.
So now Ace is got one deck left over, I believe, with him having one with, what is it now, his Demon Hunter and his Warrior. It's going to be his Shaman left as the remaining deck for him. Hey, there we go. So for Wolder and Ace, I think they are both looking for a win on this Shaman. And Raven, I for one am happy to see this. I cast an awful lot of this deck in the Invitational last weekend, where due to their 10 class 4 ban format, with all the combo decks out of the way, Quest Shaman looked absolutely unstoppable. Here in the cold light of day, I think it's probably a tier 2 deck or a low tier 1 deck, I would argue for. But if you are going for an anti-aggro strategy, I think this deck has an awful lot to offer right now, as it's just the definition of consistency. Multicaster has made the world of difference for this archetype.
And I do think, even though there's only the one overdraft in Wolder's list, I do like the landslide, which is something I think we saw from Team China in the Invitational, right? And every time it was drawn, it might have been down to the bans and everything, of course, but every time it was drawn, I was like, wow, this is good. Wow, this is good. Like, every single time. So although it looks just at a glance that there's one overdraft being cut for that one landslide, again, if you're expecting the meta we have of loads of aggro decks, that landslide can get some fantastic work done. And yeah, to no one's surprise, Quest Shaman again here from Ace. He does not have the landslide, but rocking those 2 overdrafts, and I think that's about it in difference again. I know, for example, Bunny Hopper wasn't playing Canal Slogger, but I did, when I was testing that list, find myself missing the lifesteal in just a few matchups. So it's like, oh, what I wouldn't do for 6 more health right now. Make me a Battlegrounds hero and slap some armor on top.
Stick a fork enemies, done.
Yep.
But yes, I think that for my ladder experience, there's been so much Face Hunter I've been seeing the last couple of days that Canal Slogger is at least a one-off. I run Cookie as well, but most players do seem to disagree with Bunny Hopper that that Cookie deserves a spot in the deck. Again, the argument will rage on, I'm sure. But for this specific matchup, Canal Slogger, definitely the superior card, because you just want overload. You want as much overload as you can humanly get into refill. And so therefore for Ace here, a nature spell, maybe you don't keep that because the deck is so chock full of nature. But Arcane and Multicaster, that seems like a great starting hand to me. It's a little slow, but it's doing everything I want the deck to do.
And I know, as you've also said, but you've told me a couple of times off broadcast as well, you've been jamming and loving this deck.
Oh, yeah.
In this matchup, how often does a player actually win with like a strong tempo game plan? Does that ever really matter? Or is it all about just smashing straight to Brakan and then getting, all the crazy effects after that?
It definitely happens, yeah. You have to adjust your play style in order to be able to get there. Like very often the final breaking point, the final push you make for an aggro game plan is tempo charged call for a 6, 7, 8 drop.
Right.
Generally don't want to go any smaller than that unless you really, really have to. Because the premier way that Shaman has to clear up these boards is Perpetual Flame, right? To be able to clear up all these small minions. Almost everything in the deck has 2 or 3 health. And so if you can have 1 or 2 big minions that sit outside that range, it all of a sudden becomes a lot more difficult for the Shaman to get the reverse clear. And so while I think obviously the ideal game plan is to go for tempo and overload at the same time, if you had to pick one or the other, I think just playing a whole bunch of overloads and progressing the quest as quick as you can is more important. That generally does get you there more so than the tempo game plan. But if you have to fall on the back of a tempo game plan, it can definitely win you the game.
Okay, well, both players so far have a ton of value in different ways, right? Devolving Missile for Wolder and the removal with Perpetual Flame is nice, but also just that Fireheart, which feels like it can solo games on its own sometimes. But then on the other side, Ace with double Diligent Note Taker and a Guidance means that I can't really foresee him running out of resources anytime soon. The only question at this point already is, with a slight lack of AoE, is he just running out of time at this point? This is kind of what can happen and what you were breaking down, I think, where sometimes you just end up with the tempo plan. It's not like you're playing for it, but you find yourself in a spot here like Wolder is, where it's like, oh, I'm easily winning board. You know, and if there's like a minion played next turn, great, I can push damage phase.
That's right, I didn't choose the tempo life. The tempo life chose me, as Shaman players are often quoted as saying.
Oh. Okay, well now there's Perpetual Flame and a Charge Call, even with that Novice Zapper as well to boost it if Wolder wants. Not all this turn, of course, but Perpetual Flame push 6 excites me, Derek.
Yeah, I'm incredibly tempted by that. You get to complete the quest as well, right? If you go Perpetual Flame plus Zapper. So I would be tempted to start with Investment Opportunity. I think that's a better use of your mana than just Totem. Hero power is very, very low priority in my game plan when I'm playing this deck, especially in this matchup. And so I think I would just go Investment Opportunity. Maybe if you find a Bloom, your game plan can change. But with pretty much anything else, yeah, you just clear the board and then start juicing up this Charged Call.
But what about this now, though? Novice Zapper and the Serpent Shrine doesn't do exactly the same job as Perpetual, but it still sort of beefs up the Charge Call.
I still actually just prefer the Perpetuals.
Perpetual the prefers.
Yeah, Perpetual the prefer. Wolder. It clears the board. It means that his own minions are a little bit more healthy. You're putting your opponent on exactly Perpetual Flame to be able to clear this board in response, which they full mold their hand, so they just have a bunch of random stuff there. If they don't have it, you're going to do a lot of damage here.
Yeah. And I imagine Ace is going to go fishing here. That's fish number 1, and that does not look like a Perpetual Flame. Guidance is available as well. Still got plenty of mana. Maybe with that Bloom and Diligent Note Taker, it's going to go Note Taker Guidance. Yeah, okay, I like this. This is just giving himself as many opportunities as possible to get Perpetual, but also just a ton of cards in themselves.
That's right. He could also now generate Landslide, which would be fantastic to be able to clear this board as the backup response.
Look what's in box number 2. Okay.
Oh, there we go. With maybe a bit of spell damage as well off of the Novice Zapper. Can't find it.
Job's done.
Yeah, for a second then, I thought it looked like he went for another Primordial. I was like, oh, he's greedy. He really wants the Zapper, even though he couldn't landslide that turn. Here, though, again, Serpent Shrine Wolder keeping hold of the board. And it looks like that was a Charge Call hover for a 5 cost, if my old eyes are telling me right.
Whoa. I'm a little surprised by that from Wolder. I was actually thinking that would be a Fireheart turn there, because one of the things I've learned is that Fireheart does not need to be used as a responsive play. It can be used just, especially if you have a Bloom in hand, to go, I don't know, Guidance, Rockbiter, Primordial Studies, Investment Opportunity, Lightning Bolt, Overdraft. There's so many good, cheap cards that you can just keep cycling through for extra value.
I do think I'd like this turn from Wolder, though, because this was generally going to be strong. He knew he was going to win the board. He knew he could get a solid minion, a 5-drop. But also, he's only overloaded for 1 now, right? Which means next turn he has 6 mana, 8 with Bloom to do a Fireheart turn. That, again, I agree, it doesn't have to be responsive, but I think it can be stronger, right? With just so much more mana available.
Yeah, you're not wrong. You're not wrong. Because he does get a better board to go for a Fireheart into, but the problem is that going for it this way is summoning a 5-drop instead of a 6 or an 8-drop, which is a pretty big jump. Like, it worked out great for him because he got Moonfang. For the average 3 5-drops are not Moonfang level. They're a lot worse than this. So I think it could have gone a little bit wonky for Wolder. But either way, he does get himself in a real good spot now, and he is finding some premium spells off of the Fireheart as well. Lightning Bolt into Serpent Shrine with potentially another one yet to go on the spare mana. He's just flying towards Brukan right now.
Bolt, not bad.
That's premium as well.
It's a guidance.
Wow, that's like the best possible card. Oh my god. Is that the card that says you can't attack unless you have a bunch of spells in hand or cards?
8 cards or more. Which, to be fair, if this survives till Brukan, maybe with Brukan guidance, could happen. Maybe
True.
Attack off. I have literally never seen that minion attack. I couldn't even guess at what its voice line is. But he probably doesn't even know itself. It's forgot. Like, I got told this on my first day on the job, but I've never used it, so I forgot it like a password.
It attacks and it's just like, line?
Yeah. Or it's like, take that.
I'm punching you.
5 damage, attack.
Well, 0 out of 3 on the final level for Ace, and it needs to be something a lot more impressive than what this hand is currently offering him. Still no Perpetual Flame, and realistically at this point, Flame isn't even doing enough. That blooming Moonfang just puts an end to all of his plans.
Are there any Toy Story shenanigans that can go on here for Ace? Because I'm looking, and it's not looking great. Like, is that the desperation level we're at now?
4 Razes? I don't know. Like,
oh yeah. Now we're talking.
Give him the old raspberry smoothie, but other than that, I don't think it's getting there.
The old razzle dazzle. Okay. Played some of this. Of course, again, remember, viewers at home, that 5/6 just doesn't really exist. So that 5 damage is never really going to hit face. So you don't have to worry about that. Still, a lot of damage. 9 coming out here from Wolder at a complete minimum.
Oh my goodness, another guidance. Misses out on the real dream card of Overdraft, but still, you cannot be too upset at this. Wolder now so far in the lead.
Wait, how much is he overloaded now? Because he could still guidance. And then... Oh no, yeah, he can't get anything right. He can't do anything to really activate this Serpent Shrine.
Yeah.
Keep it simple.
Keep it simple, stupid, and then Brukan plus lethal damage next turn.
Yeah, Brukan plus lethal is lethal. That charge call for 10, though.
It is for 10, yeah.
You know what card I missed? The 4/8 Wind Fury Lifesteal guy.
Oh, Walking Fountain.
Yeah,
I loved that card.
Used to steal so many games.
Such a scam card.
Yeah.
And I genuinely think it would be good for the deck. Like, there's basically no immediate heal cards that you can get off of generated effects like the effects now. There's no Sandhoof Waterbearer, Ziliax, Walking Fountain. It's very few and far between.
It's just one little rabbit and a dream. But yeah, this, let me just add mana. 5 plus 3 equals 8 equals lethal. Yeah, looks pretty good to me. Wolder going to take game number 2. And again, it's just one of those interesting outcomes of the mirror match, right? Where Ace had a lot of value in his hand from turn 1, but the problem is all of that costs mana, and when you put in that value into, for example, 2 note takers, well, you need to pay 2 mana for those, then do something else to duplicate the spell, then you need mana for those spells. So although it's a lot of value, it's very slow value, whereas Wolder just had the tempo and all the cards you could ever need.
He did. He had a very, very high tempo start. And to be fair to him, even though I was advocating for holding on to this charged call for a little bit longer, it did fit into the kind of hand he had and that he was playing. Again, Moonfang is an incredibly lucky outcome.
Don't debate yourself, Derek. You were strictly wrong. It was Moonfang every time.
I've missed you, Reddit. Yeah, I think even if you just imagine he gets like a 5-5 there, it still protects against Perpetual Flame. It still pushes a lot of damage. It still means that Ace has less timer on the clock. So, to be fair to Wolder, like I said, he doubled down on this aggressive strategy. And even though he was left with no cards at the end, and did get a very lucky Instructor Fire as well to get a guidance and then draw guidance off the top, it still was applying a lot of pressure to an opponent who did have more value than him. And so, fair play. His aggressive strategy did get there, and it means that we're going all the way to Game 5 in our 6th round of Swiss.
Yeah, and let me just quickly check, because I'm pretty sure that graphic is wrong. Both players did not win on the Shamans there, so I think there's got to be a Shaman in here somewhere. So it's going to be the Demon Hunter versus the Shaman. Let me just triple check to make sure I'm not going crazy. Yes, it is. Demon Hunter for... Wait, who?
Wolder?
Oh, for Wolder, of course. Yeah, and then Ace has the Elemental, yeah. Threw me off then just a little bit. But yeah, this is again a weird matchup now, and I'm not sure how much you've played or you've ran into Fel Demon Hunter on ladder. I've not really seen much of any Fel Demon Hunter on ladder, if I'm honest. But I feel like Elemental Shaman does similar things, but in the actual head-to-head, Elemental Shaman also has a huge bag of tricks that Demon Hunter does not. So do you think that means Elemental Shaman just generally has the edge in this one?
Yeah, I think that Quest Charm is in a good spot overall because it has... Yes, no worries. It's got more of an aggressive slant, or more of a burst damage slant now that players have started including double overdraft in the list, and all the card draw from the multicaster means that you can get a lot of damage in that mid game, which weirdly enough is what both decks are trying to do. Because while undeniably Wolder has that OTK potential, or at least huge burst potential with Il'gynoth, the Eldraki Warblades, huge attack buffs, or just going for a full Il'gynoth combo with the Moags and the Talented Arcanists. It's tough to get it all together when you don't have the quest, right? You have to hit specific cards off of Skull, which is not easy to do. And in the meantime, Shaman is getting towards its own quest completion. And as good as the removal is for the Fel Demon Hunter, it cannot deal with two Scrapyard Colossuses or two Deathwings once those come down.
Or two rabbits. Oh wait, probably can't do with Never mind. There is Skull on the left again for Wolder.
Oh yeah.
He is very good at this deck. So we'll see if that pays off. But again, as is often the case, Demon Hunter does want to have that sort of responsive openings. So the Fel Barrage or maybe even the Fel Screen Blast. But really with no card draw in the early game, it means Ace can do whatever he wants. And even if he plays minions, let's say this Zapper comes down next turn and it gets cleaned up, which you would expect it to do, it's not the end of the world, right? Because your opponents have to play a card and then you're also gaining that quest progression with the overload. So the actual body of the minion like that isn't really the biggest deal here, I would imagine, for Ace.
A couple of annoying draws now for Wolder, though. Il'gynoth is really not what you want to see. That's the perfect card to discount off of Skull of Gul'dan. Jace as well is not a bad card to discount either, just have a bit of surprise factor. And Fel Screen Blast as well, one of those cards you would love to discount. So that OTK potential is looking a little bit neutered for Wolder. He is going to need to get some other good cards like the Moag or the Arcanist off of that Skull. But to be fair, in the meantime, just going Fel Gorges on turns 4 and 5 or Felgorger Coin Skull. It's a decent way to proactively spend your mana.
Yeah, it looks like he's going to go Coin Felgorger here.
I guess if he goes Felgorger Coin Skull, he actually overdraws at that point.
And again, it's although he does want to accelerate the game, it's not like he's expecting, or it's just a fact now, I guess. It's not like Ace is rushing him down, right? So maybe he's just saying, well, actually, I can get the minions on the board now, draw more cards anyway, and still have plenty of time to get the Skull active later on. Ace is already going to go through this, though. That's quest level 1 unlocked with 2 Feral Spirits on board. And Wolder, yeah, just going to keep hold of the plan. Felgorger number 2. And both players now have a good chunk of resources available to them. Ace will be looking to progress this quest. Is this just a novice lightning bolt go kind of turn?
There are a couple of things that are making me say yes. First of all is obviously you've then played most of your hand and you get a lot of tempo and you get the 3-3. But the second thing is if we look at the charged call and the way that Wolder is playing this game, if you go for all of that, it means that you get to play... It would be a 7-drop, which is not the perfect number, but you get to play a big card into their turn 6 where they likely want to play Skull. So It was an alternate route for Ace that went very all-in. It played a lot of his cards and was very susceptible to AoE, but it could have maneuvered him into getting, Stormwind Champion or Stormwatcher, something like that, just to get a big 7-drop online going into the Skull. But instead, he thinks he's not feeling the pressure quite yet, doesn't need to take such a risky play, and understandably, respectably, just goes for the more standard clearing the board and pushing his chip damage face.
Yeah, and I imagine here from Wolder, because he will, of course, want to be casting that Skull next turn. Imagine this is just anything that's possible, or the cleanest way to clear the board here from him, just to reduce down some of that damage he is going to take. I was, of course, naturally looking at Immolation Aura does a lot of the work here, maybe even with an I-Beam as well. Not sure if he has to equip the Warblades right now. Like, he would overkill with the swing anyway. And maybe I'm too much of a fan of like keeping Warblades for like the Jace turns, obviously, where you end up healing like 1 million. I think this might be, I don't know, this feels like a little bit of a strange way to go about it. He's obviously wanting to hold on to some of his big AoE with these Arcanists, but I just think that was a very clean way to clean up the board.
No, I mean, I think even if you're going for the line that Wolder's going for, this was pretty clearly not the best way to go about it, because he could have still cleared the minion, right? Without equipping the Warglaives, because he killed a 3 health minion with 5 attack. He would have lost, obviously, a bit of heal, but he overhealed for 2 anyway with the I-Beam, and so he's almost wasting a swing here. And as you said, not having enough swings of the weapon was what did him in the previous game when we saw him on the Fell Demon Hunter. So I fully agree. I think that could have been optimized there by Wolder in order to set up for stronger following turns as well as good plays right now.
It does look like as well that Ace is not willing to put forward a small charge call here.
Yeah.
He wants to just take that turn slowly and really move towards those 10 drops, I imagine. The Diligent Note Taker being picked up as well means that his eyes might just light up with saying, oh, well, actually now I can throw a charge call out that's maybe a 6 drop with the Note Taker and still have charge call for when I get to Brukan, which is something if I have this combo of cards in hand, I'm normally pretty free with the first charge call earlier in the game.
Wolder has a tough choice here, because with those 3 cards he picked up, that's all he needs for a 1-mana 12/12 that clears the board if he just wants to go all in on those that he just drew. The problem is, if it gets answered, be it through Hex, Devolving Missiles, Revolve, a couple of Torrents as well can get the job done. He's in a much, much worse position with very little aggressive potential. But because of the fact that it feels like Ace is just going to slowly keep chugging towards his own win condition with the quest, and because Wolder's burst potential is very weak without having discounted any of the combo cards, I really like this risk he's taking here.
Yeah, unfortunately, I think we're going to see it twice in the same series that Magtheridon is going to get batted away like a little fly in this match. So I do feel bad for Wolder on that one, but the Hex just chilling there for Ace means this is a very easy way to deal with the Magtheridon. It's just what the follow-up is. Again, he could go... I guess he'd have to kind of skip. He'd lose the charge call. I was looking at Hex into Zapper charge call. Because then you also know that a lot of that, there was a decent chunk of removal used there. But it looks like, again, Ace really wants to, I'm guessing at minimum, use this charge call with the Note Taker, which I can definitely respect. Like I said, it's just like a whole extra minion.
I was looking at if it should ever be Diligent Note Taker plus Hex, because you know, Il'gynoth and Jace less so because it probably kills itself, but Il'gynoth is an annoying card if they just slam it down, and it would be nice to have an answer. But double charge call, double lightning bolt, almost certainly more important. And so Wolder here, quite simply, turning up the pressure, right, launching a lot of damage face and trying to get Jace and Il'gynoth to be enough to carry him over the finish line.
Yeah, it pained me to see that because it was an 8 damage last charge of the Aldraki Warblades for like 1 health. But he does have the other one. We've seen the re-equip, of course. But now Ace gets to just pretty much heal the majority of that damage just through this Canal Slugger, not lose any health on it whatsoever because it's going into the little froggy boy. And again, it just feels like everything Wolder's trying is getting negated one way or the other. Now, does Wolder just have to put his foot down with this AoE? Does this have to be like an Arcanist Immolation here?
Well, I'm looking at if you can go for... You don't have the mana. I was going to say you can go for Immolation and Il'gynoth, but too much survives. You'd have to go like Immolation, Aura, and Barrage, plus the swing, but then obviously you don't have mana for Il'gynoth. And so just loading up on the Fell spells before you go for Jace makes sense to me.
Push the 3.
Wow. This is a lot of potential damage right now with all these lightning bolts. I wasn't sure if we'd go for Note Taker plus lightning bolt. I was kind of tempted by one of those just to get you closer towards quest progression. But it looks like you might be going double Note Taker.
Charge call here? You can, right? Okay. Why have 2?
I see.
You can have 3.
Job's done.
8 drops can be a really big deal as well. There's more Artificer, and he again. I was looking at if he could get the. I always forget the name. You know the Demon Hunter one. That's the plus spell cost. That's always a huge one.
Well, it's charged call, right? So you can't because you can.
Oh wait, of course.
Discover.
I'm too used to seeing scenario mode.
Yeah. That would be great though. That would be good.
Technically correct. It would be a good thing right now. But yeah, of course, I'm being an idiot. But 2 more charge calls here for Ace. Did have the option to go for Bloom, but without the ability to get to 10, I think sticking at 8 feels better. Right? The 9 drops aren't quite as powerful.
Yeah, exactly. 9 drops are good. Specifically, I find if they have 1 big minion and you have a good chance of getting Blackwing, but almost every other instance I'll take an 8 drop. I fully agree. And speaking of 8 drops, here it is, Jace coming in to try and clear up some of this mess, try and bolster some of that damage to allow Wolder to go for an aggressive lethal here, or at least start moving towards a lethal, because as we can see, even with all of this pressure he's putting forward, it's still just not really getting close towards actually killing Ace.
Jace survived though, so that's some.
Yeah.
It's a 7-1. It's probably dead, but still. 14
pretty big.
is nice. There is still, again, Il'gynoth, Moarg, Bell Scream Blast, depending on what the board looks like. Like, that's not, you know, it's not the million damage we used to from OTK, but it's a lot. Like, it's a good little push when your opponent's only on 14.
Man, low-key, this Jace surviving for Wolder was an absolute disaster. It just means that the Perpetual Flame gets to come down, and then you get Brucan.
Oh, yeah.
Double opportunity, double charged call, everything just coming together now for the Shaman. And unless Wolder can, in some way that I can't imagine, get an Il'gynoth OTK on this very turn, it's all just over.
There's a Deathwing. Oh, yeah. What you're after.
That's salt and pepper, a classic combo.
Yeah.
Ketchup and bread.
Oh, don't get me excited, Derek. I know what I'm having for tea tonight. Looking at this hand for Wolder, though, it's a great hand. It just costs too much. Where are these coupons? Where are these discounts? that Wolder really needed because it's, it is piecing together that if it was playable, we can talk, but it's just too much mana.
I'm just imagining Illidan with like a pair of scissors going through a magazine, like, ooh, Moarg Artificer. I'll take that into
10% off if you buy 2. There's just nothing, right? Like, I'm trying to even think of like long shots, like Thalnos, Fellscream, Blaster Thalnos, but there's nothing in the deck that kills this board.
Yeah.
So there's nothing to fish for, right? That's the biggest problem here for Wolder. He's obviously already used Magtheridon, which is the only singular hope in this kind of scenario you could realistically have. There's no OTK. Is there? There's not strictly lethal on board, so he does the OTK attempt and just leaves Il'gynoth. So it can't be traded into, potentially, although I guess it still can because it wouldn't die anyway.
Maybe if, I don't know, he gets a rush and attacks in, like...
Yeah, just something really weird, yeah. But either way, that looks like it should add up to lethal to me, Mr. Derek.
I think it does. Serpentine alone will be able to get the job done. Yeah. And Ace going 5-2 in an incredibly close series. Very, very well fought on both sides. Gets the job done. And I honestly don't know if we'll see another series like that for the rest of the tournament. I haven't seen too many full anti-aggro lineups from our competitors. And I think that as the series, as the tournament progresses, as we see the cream rise to the top, I don't think there will be too much of these aggro and therefore anti-aggro lineups at the top. As I'm seeing it, the combo players feel like they're doing a slightly better job. And if Ace can win on out from here on in, more power to him. That would be fantastic to see. But he has a lot of pretty hard counters that he can see as the tournament progresses.
Yeah, it's one of those weird things, right? Every time we have a huge big open like this, with this many players, we talk a lot about meta reads and such. And both of these players have done a good job of reading what the meta would be. A huge chunk of their opponents would have been aggro players. Their lineups with these Fell Demon Hunters, the Shamans, of course, along with certain builds of how to build like Quest Warrior in a more slightly defensive way, has clearly done a decent job. They were 4-1 going into this, I think, or 3-1, I can't. 4-1. So it does mean that like they are looking good. It's just as you mentioned, well, if the anti-aggro players are doing well and the combo players can keep up,